Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cooking with Miss Ellis. Today, we are making shepherd's pie. So for those of you who don't know, shepherd's pie is a ground beef saute mixture with a topping of mashed potatoes. So I have all of my mise en place set up, as you can see. And I'm going to go through the actual process with you, and we're going to make a beautiful dinner. All right, so the first ingredient that we're going to prep are the potatoes for our mashed potatoes. So you're just going to take the peeler, peel off the skin. For this recipe, you do want to peel the potatoes. You don't want to leave the skin on because we're looking for a nice white, fluffy mashed potato. Leaving the skins on will discolor it. But you certainly can leave the skins on for baked potatoes or even scalloped potatoes that my camera person Dre made the other night, which were delicious. All right, so peel it completely. And then what you're going to do is take a knife, a chef knife. Remember, you want to have 3 fingers around the handle of the knife, thumb and forefinger around the top of the blade. And you're just going to cut down and make sort of planks. Once you have the plank, you're going to cut the potato in half and then cut it across into small cubes, just like that. Now, if you've ever made potatoes, you know that they oxidize if left exposed to air. So once you have your potatoes cut, it should go into a pot of cold water. Do all of the potatoes, make sure they are submerged, and then if my camera person wants to come over here, what I have are the potatoes that I am going to use for the shepherd's pie cooking right here. Now, what I have here is water, covered the potatoes by about 2 inches, a sharp paring knife, because this is how I'm going to determine doneness. All you need to do is stick the knife through the largest of the diced potatoes. If it comes apart easier than that, they're done. So this has about maybe 4 more minutes. Have a colander handy. This will go in the sink. You're going to drain the potatoes, and then the potatoes will go right back into the pot. Some butter, salt, and pepper will be mashed in with the potatoes, and that's going to be our topping.
May I ask a question?
You may.
Approximately how many potatoes should we be using in order to make those mashed potatoes?
The recipe that I am using calls for 1.5 pounds of potatoes.
Very nice, thank you.
All right, so now I have the rest of the ingredients for the actual shepherd's pie. I have 1 carrot that I have partially cut, and you see the different methods of cutting a carrot. I have some celery here that I'm going to show you how to do, 1 stalk, 2 garlic cloves, chopped rosemary. I have about a cup of peas. I have half of an onion chopped. I'm going to show you how to chop the other half. My meat, I'm using beef. You could use lamb if you wanted. Some flour, which is going to be for the roux, and then some more seasoning ingredients. This is beef broth. I have some tomato product. And this egg is actually going to be mixed into the potatoes. But I just need the yolk for this. So I'm just going to show you real quick how to separate, crack the egg. There is a garbage can here. I'm not just dumping this on the floor. Separate the shell and literally just transfer the yolk in between the shell so that the white just goes away. This little stringy thing is called the chalaza. It doesn't hurt you, so it's okay if it's attached. All right. So first ingredient, remember recipes are always written in order of use. So the first ingredient in the ingredient list is the first ingredient that you have to prep. So I need 1 large onion diced. So I'm making 4 horizontal slices. Turn the onion facing me. Several vertical slices. Turn the onion back. And now I have a dice. Now, invariably, you're going to wind up with this little piece at the end. You're going to be like, what do I do with this? I'm going to show you. You have a core here. You need to cut that out. So this gets discarded. And then just coarsely chop the rest of this. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just try to make it as close to the same size as your original mixture you're going to do. Cover that up. So when you're doing a carrot, so carrots are obviously round, you always want to make a flat surface. So when you go to cut the carrot, it doesn't roll. So I did that, and now I have a plank. I've cut the plank into strips, and then I cut the strips into cubes. So exactly the same process as with the potato. I'm just going to take that and just quickly show you how to cut these. So line them up. Remember to 3 fingers around the handle, thumb and forefinger at the top of the blade, guiding fingers curled under, and then you have a nice, about a 1/2 inch dice. That to the side. Same process for the celery. So the celery will start off like this, and then into strips, and then into small cubes. Gather that up. I'm going to put the celery in with the carrots. Now I have some garlic. This is 2 cloves here. I'm going to use 1 more. Slice. Once you have a sliced clove, just coarsely chop it. Once it gets a little bit coarse, palm on top of the blade, chop it up. This is going to cook for some time, so if you have bigger chunks of garlic, it should soften and with no trouble. I'm just going to put that over here. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to drain my potatoes because I know they're done. So, yep. Now, in school, we use pot holders, and I don't have any at the moment, so I'm going to use a dry towel. Drain the potatoes. Get all the water out. Back into the pot. Now, what some people like to do when they make mashed potatoes is to turn the heat back on. Well, what this does is it helps to dry up the potatoes a little bit, make them a little bit more fluffy when you actually mash them. So that's what I'm going to do. And you can also start just breaking them up. So when you go to mash them, they'll just be a little bit less time. They're looking really good. A little salt and pepper as usual. Remember, you have to season throughout the cooking process, not just at the end. So once these potatoes are mashed, I'm going to taste, and if I need to adjust the seasoning, I will. All right, I'm just going to let that cool for a second. I'm going to add my butter right here. I have about 2.5 tablespoons of butter. Mix that in. And I have an egg yolk right here. I'm going to hold off on adding that for now because I don't want the egg to cook. So I'm going to let that cool off, and I'm going to mix the egg yolk into that mixture and mash it up, and that'll be our topping. So the rest of my mise en place is done. So scrolling down to the procedure. All right, so I'm using a cast iron enamel pot. I'm going to heat that up. Remember, you always want to have your pot hot before your oil goes in. That's just the general procedure, plus it helps to prevent ingredients from sticking. So heat that up. You can do a little cleanup while you're waiting. Then you just bring your ingredients over so you have everything right at your fingertips. Try to minimize the amount of steps you take in the kitchen. Will just make your life a lot easier. So I just wanted to explain about this tomato product. In the era of pandemic cooking, we have to use what we have. So these were leftover cherry tomatoes. that I decided I was going to put into the shepherd's pie. Otherwise, I would have thrown them out. The recipe calls for tomato paste, but I'm going to use these. And I also have some tomato sauce that I made a couple days ago, and I'm just going to use in the shepherd's pie. So this is a very flexible recipe. You can use whatever you have on hand. So my pot's heating. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of oil. I'm using olive oil. You could use vegetable oil, whatever you have, it's fine. Don't let it smoke. We're just warming it up. Make sure you have your utensils handy. First ingredient is the onion. And I want to make sure this is hot enough. You should hear a sizzle when the ingredient goes into the pot. One way to tell is if you put your hand above the pot, if you feel heat emanating from the surface, you know that the pan is hot enough. So I'm going to put this in. Hear that? Stir that around. This will cook for about 4 to 5 minutes until the onion is soft. A little salt and pepper here. Try to use all of your senses when you're cooking. So I'm obviously looking at the mixture. I'm hearing it as it cooks. I'm going to taste it.
And I can smell it.
And my camera person can smell it. I'm going to put the egg yolk in here. Now another skill that's very useful in cooking is to know when to add things even if the recipe doesn't call for it. So I can see that the potatoes are a little bit dry. So I'm going to add a little heavy cream.
Can you use half and half or milk?
You can use I always like to add the garlic after I add the onions and the carrots and celery, only because most people burn garlic, and you can prevent that by adding it after the other aromatics. So this should cook, this should cook for about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. You're not trying to brown it, you're just trying to soften the vegetables. So that will take a few minutes, so we're gonna stop recording. And I'll see you in 10 minutes. I have my vegetable mixture cooked. Can we see that? Can we get a picture of that? Okay, perfect. So the vegetables are softened. I'm going to add some seasoning to this now. What I have here is some chopped fresh rosemary. This is what it looks like before it's chopped. It's very piney. So what you want to do is strip the stem of the leaves. Strip the stems. And then finely chop this. Rosemary is one of those herbs that doesn't really soften quickly, so you want to make sure you finely chop it, because otherwise it's like chomping into a pine tree. So we don't want that. So finely chop. I have about 2 teaspoons of chopped rosemary. Now remember, when you're reading a recipe, when you have an ingredient like rosemary where the directions say 2 teaspoons chopped rosemary, you have to chop it first and then measure it. Same thing with onion. If the recipe says 1 cup of chopped onions, you have to chop the onion and then measure. So this is going in. And the recipe called for fresh thyme, but I didn't have any. So instead, I'm going to use some fresh parsley. So again, this is another substitute that you could use you know, given the circumstances under which we're living at the moment. So I'm just going to coarsely chop the fresh parsley. Now, this does not need a long cook because this is a very tender herb. So I'm going to actually add this parsley in at the end. So I'm just doing my prep. Now I'm going to add a little more flavoring. This is Worcestershire sauce, about a tablespoon. Just dump that right in. Stir that up. Turn up the temperature. Now I'm going to add my tomatoes. So those are the chopped tomatoes that I prepped earlier. And just a little bit of this tomato sauce. I'm going to crank this up to high because I want this to kind of cook quick. This is going to thicken the mixture.
And about how much, Nan? Like 3/4 of a cup, or what are you looking for?
With this, because it's thicker, it's about 2 to 3 tablespoons. I used all the chopped fresh tomatoes just because I wanted to get rid of them. So it's very, like I said, it's very amenable. This recipe is flexible. But what you want to do is try not to make it too soupy. So what I'm going to do after I add the meat, which is 1 pound of ground beef, after I add the meat, let that cook down for a little bit. I'm going to add some flour. This is 2 tablespoons of regular all-purpose flour. I'm going to add that in. That's going to thicken the mixture. And then this is some beef broth. If you don't have beef broth, you can use chicken broth. If you don't have chicken broth, you can use water. And I have about a cup of peas that's going to go in at the end as well. So you can hear, again, that things are starting to cook down real nice. Do stir because it will stick slightly and you don't want to burn anything. But you don't have to stand over it forever. Now I preheated my oven. It's going to get up to about 400 degrees. I've mashed my potatoes. I adjusted the seasonings. I added a little bit more butter and cream because why not? When I get back to school, I'm going to, But in any case, everything is ready to go. I have my casserole dish right here.
Moo! Moo!
All right, so here goes the meat. Thank you, camera person. Break it up. Now, as far as using any kind of ground meat, whether it's pork or chicken or beef or lamb or anything, you have to make sure that it doesn't have any odor when you open up the container, when you unwrap it. And also, speaking of wrapped food, there's been a lot of discussion about what you should do with your groceries to keep them safe for your family when you bring them back from the store. So they do recommend wiping things down with either hydrogen peroxide or, some sort of alcohol-based cleaner, even so the water will work. Just try to wipe everything down. Use gloves. When the gloves come off, put the gloves in the garbage, wash your hands, don't touch your face. That's generally what they're saying. All right, so back over here. You want to cook this until there's no pink left. This is going to cook again in the oven. So, but you still do want to make sure that it's nice and browned up and looking all good. You could make this vegetarian and just leave out the meat. It wouldn't be quite the same consistency, and of course you wouldn't use beef stock, but you could do a facsimile of this vegetarian. I'm going to add my 1 cup of stock. This is going to have to come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, the general rule is to reduce by half, is usually what they say. And that's just a way to thicken the whole mixture. After that happens, the parsley and the peas will go in, and then the whole mixture will be put in here, and then the mashed potatoes on top. And it's not a bad idea to drizzle a little bit more melted butter on the top of the mashed potatoes, get them all nice and, crunchy. All right, so we're going to stop the recording here for a couple minutes, and then, see you back later. We're back. Technical difficulties. All right, so here's my mixture. So this is the meat cooked, the herbs added in, tasted for seasonings, everything ready to go, the peas in there too. So my camera person asked if I ever talk about the origins of specific dishes. And I said that sometimes I do, and this is a perfect example of a recipe that we've kind of adopted as Americans, but really came from England, Ireland, those countries, as a way to use the less expensive ingredients, so the ground lamb and the potatoes and the carrots, things that everybody has. It's more of a like peasant food type of thing. I think we've succeeded in elevating that to something a little bit more, elegant. So I'm just going to spread out my potatoes. Now I just mash these with the potato masher. You could use a mixer if you wanted, but sometimes that tends to over mash the potatoes and they get a little bit gluey. And since this is kind of a rustic dish, it's okay to have the potatoes not completely 100% smooth. I would say these would be referred to as smashed potatoes, not necessarily mashed potatoes. All right, and that's all there is to it. This is going to go in the 400-degree oven for about, 30 minutes or so until it's nice and brown and crispy. Thanks for watching, and all I have to say to Babish, watch your back. Signing off.